I've always been tight with my cousin. His name is Cole. We're the same age and we hit it off really well, always hanging out together. We ended up in the same classes all through elementary school, and we had a blast outside of school as well. When we were in 6th grade, around 12 years old, we were at Cole's house on a Friday afternoon in late May, getting pumped for the weekend. My mom had called to let me know that our grandpa was in the hospital. Not in serious trouble, but being kept overnight for observation. Both our parents were at the hospital, and my mom said it was cool for me to crash at Cole's place with his older brother, Hunter, looking after us. Hunter was a cool dude, not the annoying big brother type. We ordered pizza, goofed around, and around 9 p.m.-ish, there was a knock on the door. Cole answered it, and there were these two older guys claiming to be from the city, checking on water pressure issues in the neighborhood. They were asking a lot of questions, wanting to come inside. Hunter stepped in and politely told them to check the other houses. They left, and we didn't think much of it, going back to goofing off. Eventually, we hit the sack, deciding to bunk together in Cole and Hunter's room. They stripped down to their briefs, and I joined in, even though I did feel a bit awkward about it, but hey, we were all guys, so no big deal. We chatted and then crashed. Next morning, I had to pee, so I quietly did my thing and heard some noise in the family room. I thought it was Hunter or Cole, but when I got back to the bedroom, both of them were still there. I woke up and told them that something was wrong. We sneaked into the family room and, wouldn't you know it, those same two guys were there, robbing the place, one of which had a really big knife. We made a mad dash to the front door, got it open, and ran outside. We got super lucky as a cop had happened to be passing by at that exact moment. We flagged him down and told him about the robbers, and more cops eventually arrived. They busted the two guys. Turns out, they got in through a broken latch on the laundry room window. They probably targeted us because they figured dealing with kids would be easier than adults. To make things worse, we were waiting outside as the cops searched the house, making sure the robbers were there alone. Some neighbors came out, including some kids from our school, and yeah, you probably guessed by now, we were still in our briefs. We had to stand there like a bunch of comedy movie characters in plain view of everyone, until we were finally allowed back inside. Cole and I went back to school on Monday, and had to endure a few weeks of teasing and snickering, but eventually it died down. I still wonder what might have happened to us if I hadn't gotten up in the middle of the morning. Back in middle school, I had a tight-knit gang of friends. All of us were girls. We hung out like there was no tomorrow, with sleepovers being the norm. We'd switch houses since our parents knew each other, and we all lived fairly close, with the furthest one being around 10 minutes away. This one sleepover, we were at my friend Caitlin's place, and her two cousins happened to be crashing there too. Caitlin had a bunch of older siblings who were honestly pretty cool. They usually stuck to their rooms during our sleepovers and only showed up for grub, so we never felt like we were intruding. Her brother would sometimes let us mess around with his PS2, and his sisters would dish out high school gossip quite often, which we thought was awesome. Caitlin had a great relationship with her siblings, but her cousins, not so much. One of her cousins was in 8th grade, closer in age to one of Caitlin's older sisters, who was in high school as a freshman, so she stayed in her room. The other was a junior in high school, and naturally, he crashed with Caitlin's brother. The girl cousin seemed nice, if not a bit shy, but the guy, man, he set off some alarms. Something about him was just so off. He had this strange way about him. When he smiled, it felt like he was smiling at some secret joke in his head rather than you. Plus, he had this greasy, shoulder-length, dirty blonde hair and was kind of scrawny for a junior, if I'm honest. He looked like he should be a freshman. Caitlin always looked uncomfortable around him. Later, in Caitlin's room, she spilled the beans about just recently reconnecting with her cousins. Apparently, their moms had a falling out a few years ago, but now they were trying to rebuild bridges, so her aunt and her kids came over for a weekend visit. Caitlin thought her female cousin was decent enough, but she found the guy super weird. Since he arrived at their place, he'd been more interested in hanging out with her than with her brother. He'd go into her room, rifle around through her stuff, and try to start conversations. He was also a bit touchy. He played with her hair and touched her in areas that, well, let's just say he really shouldn't have been. Whenever she would pull away, he'd give her this eerie, cold-eyed stare before that creepy, peculiar smile crept onto his face. We all agreed he was weird, but we moved on to more typical 6th grade chatter. We ended up watching a movie before hitting the sack, and we took turns heading to the bathroom in the hallway, which Caitlin shared with one of her sisters. The eldest sister had her own bathroom, so it was just the hallway restroom. Since I didn't really care about the order, I was last. When my friend Lucio returned and said that she was done, I was relieved. I walked down the hallway, opening the bathroom door, and that's when I realized Caitlin's cousin was standing in there. In the dark, the lights weren't even on. I quickly apologized and closed the door, completely confused. At that point, I just wanted to flee back to the room. I mean, he was in the bathroom with the lights off, standing there as if he was almost expecting me. Before I could bolt, he opened the door and smiled at me, and he said I could go ahead. I didn't really care about brushing my teeth at that point, but I didn't want to provoke any reaction from him, so I entered the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I brushed my teeth and did what I needed to do. Now, here's where things take a really creepy turn. I went to open the door after I was done, and he was still there, just waiting, that same creepy damn smile on his face. He looked straight at me and said,
"Let me walk you back to your room."
I was dumbstruck. I didn't even know what to say. I assume he took my silence as a yes, because before I knew it, he grabbed my hand and was guiding me back to Caitlin's room. His hands were uncomfortably warm and sweaty, even though he didn't look like he was sweating or was even remotely warm. I felt numb and I could hear my own breathing. Honestly, I thought I was going to pass out. That hallway felt like it was never ending. When I reached the room, he let go of my hand and said goodnight, and proceeded to go back to the room he was staying in. I walked back inside, and I must have had a look on my face because my friends all rushed up to me, asking what I was doing, or what was wrong. I told them what happened, and we all agreed it was super weird. Caitlin said she would talk to her mom in the morning. I hoped it would all end there, but it didn't. We weren't allowed to lock the doors during sleepovers, which usually was fine, but not in this case. I must have been asleep for a few hours when Caitlin started shaking me awake. She'd been awake for a while, and since I was closest to her, I was the first one she reached out to. She told me with a shaking voice that her cousin had opened the door to the room twice. He just stared into the room for almost a full minute before quietly shutting the door. Of course, this terrified me when I heard this, so I agreed to jump into Kaylin's bed, and we waited. It didn't take long before I heard the door open, and we both froze, eyes fixed on it. The hallway was dark, with the only light shining coming from the moon outside. Despite this, we could still make out a silhouette of someone's head peeking through the door. We could feel his eyes on us. As he stared into the darkness of Kaylin's room for a few seconds, we tried not to move, so he wouldn't know we were awake, but unfortunately, it didn't matter. He let out a breath as if he was trying not to laugh. Through the darkness and through the door, all we could hear was,
"Hi, Caitlin."
And then we heard it shut. Caitlin looked like she wanted to cry. She grabbed onto me and we held each other, waiting for him to come back again, but he never did. I guess it wasn't as fun since he knew we were awake. We never went back to sleep that night, though. My mom came to pick me up early in the morning, and I said my goodbyes. I was glad Caitlin's cousin was still asleep. When I saw her at school, I asked what happened after I left. She said she told her mom, and her mom was really concerned, saying she talked to their aunt. She must have told my mom about what happened to me too, because she asked me about it later, prying to see if anything else happened. After that, she made sure Caitlin's cousins weren't around before allowing me to sleep over there. But she didn't have to worry because they never came back after that. I don't know if Caitlin's mom had another falling out with her sister or if she just never invited them back, but Caitlin's creepy cousin, let's not meet ever again. This story's real, and it happened to my dad back in the 70s, in his home country of Fiji. I can't dig up a newspaper or article or anything, but I've confirmed it with my mom and other relatives, so as far as I'm concerned, it's legit. So, my dad was living in this farming area, and the houses, or farms, were miles apart from each other. When he was around 14, he got invited to sleep over at his uncle's place. He liked this uncle, so he agreed. This uncle had a wife and 3 kids, ages 3, 4, and a 6-month-old baby. They had a good time, eating, chatting, playing with the kids, and then my dad decided it was bedtime. Sometime after my dad went to sleep, he was jolted awake by this massive noise. Immediately following this, he hears screams and something that sounded like a gunshot. He rushed to his uncle's room and was met with the sight of his uncle shooting his wife and his kids who were in the room with him. My dad freaked out and bolted away. He tried one of the doors, but it was jammed due to it being an old farmhouse and desperately in need of repairs. So, his only option was to go back to the other side and use the other door, which inevitably meant crossing his uncle's room again. My dad wasn't a fan of the idea, but ultimately, he had no choice. So, he slowly walked back and couldn't help but peek inside. As he peeked inside, he saw his uncle, gun in hand, standing above the lifeless bodies of his family. As my dad was staring in complete disbelief and utter shock, his uncle turned around and looked at him. And all he said to him was, "You were lucky I let you live." Then, he puts the gun to his own head. My dad freaks out and starts running, and From behind him, he hears one more round go off. He sprints out of the house, down the dirt road, all the way back to his own place. Lucky for him, his dad, my grandfather, was still up with some friends, having a few drinks and playing cards. My dad practically collapses on the front porch and spills the whole story. They called the police, and when they went to investigate, they found everyone dead. My dad later learned that his uncle had quite a few mental issues and was supposed to be on medication, which he wasn't taking, obviously. That's why he went crazy that night. As you can imagine, my dad was traumatized for a long time after that, dealing with recurring nightmares for years.